This is Whiskey Whispers, and I wanted to do a couple of things tonight. First off, I'm a little bit late in saying this, but the other day I crossed 100 subs, which was really a very surprising and humbling thing for me. I know that for some people in the community who are very established and have thousands of subscribers, 100 may not seem like a lot, but it seems inconceivable to me. I am just so grateful and so humbled that there are actually people that enjoy listening to me just come on and talk about stuff or read poems. I got so much out of this community before I started contributing to it that it really makes me feel great to think that in some small way I'm doing the same thing. So really heartfelt thanks to everyone who subscribed. I really appreciate your support and your kind words. And I'm also very happy to take requests if there's anything you'd like me to try. I'm currently writing a couple of things that I want to use for whisper videos. One is I'm probably going to be doing a little roleplay video, kind of a teaching roleplay, classroom kind of scene. And I want to assure you I'm trying to make it as non-creepy as possible. It's completely non-sexual. But I've always been kind of curious about these roleplay videos, but a little hesitant because I'm worried about being thought of as that guy. But yeah, anyway, if you have any other requests for me, I'd be happy to take them. So the main part of what I wanted to talk about tonight came out of a conversation I was having with a friend and fellow whisperer about a week ago. And I've had kind of an interesting personal history with spirituality and religion. And I think that in terms of the paths we forge for ourselves in life, the choices we make spiritually are some of the most important and also simultaneously the most fraught with peril. And I just wanted to talk a little bit about kind of what spirituality means to me and what my personal history with it has been. So, I'll start off with a little bit of just kind of personal background. I grew up basically an atheist. My parents were not religious when I was very young. They didn't go to church. I never grew up going to church. I had grandparents who did, but they lived across country. So I was never part of a religious community, and I really never knew anything different. We never grew up talking about God or, talking about holidays in a religious manner. I mean, I did. I was a really inquisitive kid, and I wondered about the origins, for example, of holidays, so I would ask. And both my parents are really well-educated, intelligent people, and were always willing to expose me and tell me the stories behind them. And I remember my mom and I actually read parts of, when I was little, read parts of the Bible and the Torah and the Quran and the Bhagavad Gita together because I had expressed an interest. And since she didn't have a lot of experience with religion herself, we kind of learned together. And it was a lot of fun. My parents were always really open to me exploring faith, and they always said if I wanted to try going to church or to synagogue or, whatever, that they would be happy to help me do that. But I gotta be honest, especially when I was young, I was made deeply uncomfortable by religion. I went to church with a couple of friends of mine at one point. Multiple times over the years. Like I'd sleep over, or I'd be spending missing for me. Now, I'm not saying that I had really any understanding of the dogma or the specific beliefs. I'm not saying anything against the people who were members of those churches, because they were perfectly nice people. But as someone who had been raised in a completely secular, a-religious environment, it was like walking into a different world. I mean, these were people, I remember thinking that, these were people that had beliefs that were so different from mine, or so different from my family's. And I had a really hard time when I was about 10, kind of reconciling that there was this whole group of people that believed in a heavenly creator, and some kind of entity that created the heavens and the earth, and was responsible for all of the life on it. And then there was this other huge group of people who believed that no such thing exists, that life was the result of accidental chemical reactions, and that basically the development of the universe was just a big series of coincidences. And I just wondered a lot, how could people who think such diametrically opposite things exist on the same planet? And it was something that was not really easy for me to reconcile, because I remember thinking that at one point I wondered if my life would be more full, if I would be happier, if I believed in something. I mean, I remember thinking at one point when I was kind of an angsty teenager that the only thing I believed in was a lack of belief, which I suppose is kind of the hip, aloof teenager thing to believe, but there's something very alienating about that. And I remember when I went to church with my friends, that even though it seemed very foreign to me and I was made uncomfortable by it, that I loved the sense of belonging that those people had. I loved that, my friend's mother could always count on, 5 other friends that she went to church with, that they were there for one another, that they were brought together by shared belief and a shared sense of ethics and a shared worldview. And I remember thinking that I didn't have that with anyone. And how alienating was that? Now, that's not to say that as a young adult or an adult I went out and found Jesus, because I really didn't. Religion was always fascinating to me, and I studied it in college. I almost majored in it. I've done a lot of reading just about comparative religion and American religions and the politics of it and the sociology of religion, and the theories behind it always fascinated me, but I could never bring myself to believe. I guess, I don't know, I feel bad because I'm not one of those people who can go on faith very easily. I'm very empirical when it comes to matters of metaphysics or the paranormal or anything like that. And I've always kind of approached religion with a sense of scientific inquiry. So yeah, try as I might, I've just really never been able to believe. And when I was a teenager, my parents started really actively pursuing and studying Buddhism, specifically Theravada Buddhism. And I think as a teenager I thought the idea of Buddhism was really interesting, but nothing that I would really be able to persevere with and be disciplined enough for. And I never really thought much of it. My parents kind of went about their way, and I went about mine, and went off to college and did a lot of stupid things, and probably got myself damned to as many hells as religions could come up with, if such a thing exists. But then I went through something kind of interesting, and I had a number of periods, especially in college and immediately after, where I had very deep depression, intense sadness, feelings of anxiety, panic attacks, very hard time managing both myself, the world around me, under understanding my feelings. There were times when I felt as though I was a stranger in my own body. And I remember just kind of crying out for answers, for some kind of belief, or something to rest my head upon, figuratively. And it really never came. I still persisted in having this real anxiety about organized religion and dogma. And then I kind of became one of those dudes that I always made fun of. Somebody, you ask them, you get talking about religion, and the person says, well, I'm not religious, but I'm spiritual. Before then I always thought, oh, that's kind of a douchey thing to say. I mean, it's a, fucking cop-out, because you don't have any real beliefs that you want to stick with, but you want to seem as though you're with it. But, yeah, I mean, actually, I'm kind of living proof that such a thing does exist. Because I think I realized that, for me at least, and I'm not saying this isn't true for everyone else, that, for me at least, dogma really wasn't the answer. I wasn't comforted by the notion that God had a plan for us. I didn't like the idea that I was living with original sin, or that basically I had to strive every moment of every day to keep from being damned. I didn't like the very formalized ritualistic elements that I saw in some religions. And again, I'm very, very sorry if I offend anyone here. It's certainly not my intention. I'm talking really just strictly about what works for me, not what I believe to be right or ethical or anything like that. But I believed that in my heart that there was always something greater out there. And at the risk of sounding like a complete cliche, it was during this time of great sadness and questioning and wondering that I kind of came to Buddhism. And I started being a regular practitioner. It started really very simply as kind of a relaxation tool to center myself and become mindful and to live in the moment and do each action of my life, everything that I say, everything that I do, with a sense of mindfulness and well-being and equanimity. And of course this is easier said than done. Right now, for example, I'm just a terrible practitioner.